followed by relationships with colleagues. Outstanding. So a little bit of clarification on what are we supposed to be doing when with the Rise and Thrive grant. Many of you have watched the Bidders Conference, and you also attended the first learning event. So we've kind of given this information, but we wanted to go ahead and loop it one more time. And this is a phased approach. The first phase is the planning phase, and the second phase is the implementation phase. And one thing during this first planning phase, there's also an opportunity to be able to think about how to make your community partnership visible, or do a little bit of marketing around your partnership and getting it out into the community. And you can do that lots of different ways. One idea that we had is by capitalizing on the many national health observances, so the special days or the special months that come up, just to get the name of your campus community coalition out. And I think we have this shared understanding that in between phase 1 and phase 2, you'll submit this plan that you're working on developing. Another way to think about it, and the question that we get is, I'm not really sure, like there's all these pieces and parts, what should I be doing when? So the first part is the virtual learning communities, and that's what you're here doing right now. These are required to attend monthly, and they help you connect with fellow grantees. It's also where we push out content about leading campus community partnerships, give you the opportunity to connect about those leadership challenges, and also get information about completing the deliverables. At the virtual learning community meetings, we have those deliverables, you know what the title of them are, and we hope to build content into the learning community meetings that will be supported as you engage in those deliverables. So the first piece that we have is that virtual learning community meeting. The second piece that we have, well, I should pause there and see, are there any questions about the virtual learning community meetings? What questions do you have? Okay, you can type those in the chat or unmute. Okay, hearing or seeing none, the second part of phase 1 is the webinar series. And the webinar series is designed to provide the opportunity for you to get innovative ideas, right? And so you see those monthly webinars, and they bring in guests maybe from within the state or out of state to give you seed ideas to support whatever it is you want to implement. Because part of implementing is thinking through what is the problem that we're trying to address in our community and how can we solve it in creative ways. And in order to do that, you need to have that innovative ideas or that innovative thinking be brought to you. So by design, that webinar series that you're required to have 2 people attend is to get those innovative ideas. So we have the virtual learning communities, which support you in the process. Then we have the webinar to give you those ideas about what to actually implement. And then you have the deliverables, right? And those deliverables are really those, the homework or things you should be doing as a campus community partnership in between learning community meetings. And the reason we do this is to really stage out that planning process. So it's not one of those grants where here's the planning grant money, go ahead and plan, we're not going to support you at all, and then your plan is due. And then we're going to review your plan and say, well, why didn't you do all these things, right? Instead, it's designed to be a learning community, so we support you every step along the way, and each step builds on that plan that you are going to submit and turn in. And once that plan is reviewed, then that and approved, that will unlock your implementation funds, right? So those deliverables are key things, and just to kind of keep the work moving, keep the group moving forward, and keep folks working. What we don't want is sort of that, end of last minute, oh, it's due tomorrow. So then one person gets stuck doing all the work and feels like they're making all the decisions. So what we hope is that the deliverables are structured in a way that are prescribed enough to give you the support you need to lead your campus community partnership, but flexible and open enough so that you can work in a way that makes sense for you with your local partnership. Finally, during phase one, that $10,000 is designed to help you get the word out and promote your campus community partnership. So again, you can do branding activities, you can engage in events around those special health days or those national health observances. You will tell us what you do in your final report. Those aren't things that we necessarily need to see or hear about. However, you're welcome to connect with each other. We'll build in a time next learning community for you to share what you're doing to get the word out about your campus community partnership. But basically, it's how do you make yourself visible? So this phase one, you attend the virtual learning communities, you attend the webinar series, you complete the deliverables, and you get the word out about your campus community coalition. So I'll pause here and ask what questions you have. Feel free to unmute, or you can type in the chat box any questions you might have.
So Holly, when we had our call with Nicole and Julie, we discussed just getting the word out, promotion, and there was talk of a template that would be made available to us for a media release about receiving the award. And I don't think we've had any follow-up on that. So I wanted to check in to see if there's been any anything made available at this point.
Absolutely, that's a good question. Julie, I'll hand it over to you because I know that's been an area of your work.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. And we have been working on that. That is just in the review process right now. And you'll be able to expect that along with a couple of other items that you'll be able to use to help promote your campus community partnership. So you should see that here within the next week. And we'll make that available as well on the Google Drive as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for following up, Angela. There's some chat in the chat box. Amanda has a question and wants to know, what are some of the names of your campus community partnerships? So if everyone could type in what names your campus community partnerships have, I think that would be helpful and supportive to Amanda as she thinks through her situation. So I'll give you a few minutes to go ahead and enter in your partnership's name. And if you don't have one yet, go ahead and just say, we're still thinking about it. Alexis notes that her campus community partnership is called the Mental Health Alliance. Donna says, ooh, I don't have a catchy name. Michael's still working on a catchy name. Sarah's still working on a catchy name. Amanda asked the question, should Rise and Thrive be included? Answer is no. Your campus community partnership should be a reflection of that. This is just the name of the grant opportunity. Let's see. We have the Ohio University. Our current concept is Bobcats Thrive. Jenny says, is it okay to reach out to our campus community partners now to see if they can help us come up with a catchy name? Absolutely. Amanda says, we have an existing campus collaborative called Healthy UC, but it hasn't included community partners before this project. So we're not sure how to delineate this from our existing group or even if we should. Interesting question, Amanda. It'll be exciting to see how your group wants to tackle that. Eric says to be determined, and Angela says that's just something else to put on the list. Yeah, so I think it's really important to think about, and the reason why we have the get the word out part is because some members of coalitions or groups or partnerships aren't planners, they're doers, right? Have you ever experienced that where people, they would just rather do anything but plan, and they're saying, well, every minute you plan is a minute that our problem's getting worse. So the doers are the people that you really want to put on the get the word out because that feels like they're doing something. So it's a great way to have your doers get together, figure out a name, figure out how we're going to make a name. Are we going to have a contest? Are we going to do whatever? And then figure out what materials. Maybe you want to use your money to buy a logo. Maybe you want to, have an ad in the school newspaper and the community newspaper. All of those things can be assigned to those folks who really are doers. Elizabeth is called the SSC Community Care Team. Elizabeth, remind us all what SSC stands for those who might not be aware.
It's Stark State College.
Absolutely.
So we might want to think that through. That's what I was thinking, but that's what we put for now.
Yeah. And then Laura from our facilitation team says, engage your team. More input can help with creativity and catchy names. Absolutely. It's really important to name it, and naming a group is a big deal, right? Because once you name it, then you're able to fill in that press release that's coming with the name of your group and how it's going to move forward. Okay, and you do have that money and flexibility in there. You're also working with students, maybe reaching out to your design college to see if anybody is really interested, or maybe offer a prize money with that for the best prize of the logo or things like that. Remember, you all are the best resources to each other. We have posted the roster, so feel free to start email groups or email chains with each other to talk about your names, or how you're doing it, or how you're spending that money to get the word out. Thanks so much for the dialogue. Any other questions about phase one? So with phase one, you do have that set of deliverables, and all these deliverables together are going to comprise your plan. One thing to know about the deliverables is we don't really have any set what this should look like. You are all trailblazing. This is the first time we worked with a group of campus community partnerships. We're really excited to see how you interact with materials and what you come up with. Also remember, when you turn in a deliverable, it doesn't mean you never look at it again. These aren't your forever deliverables. We would expect your initial roster is going to grow. That's why it's called initial. And we ask you to turn one in because, again, it gives that impetus for those people who like to plan. They can work on it, and then your doers see you're checking something off, right? And that's kind of what it is. And so you can celebrate. Go back to your community and say, we've got deliverable 1 done. It's amazing. Now we're working on deliverable 2, right? You've got to have that mix to get your planners and your doers and keep them both happy and engaged. What we're going to be working on this time in this particular learning community is building knowledge, skills, and attitudes to help you really narrow down that issue. And that's why we had you read the article on wicked problems and watch the video, because you're dealing with a lot of gnarly things on campus, right? And those big things need to be winnowed down into a manageable piece, right? You know you have $50,000, you know you have a little over a year. So what can you do to have an early win for your campus community partnership that's going to start making a dent in that issue you've identified? Once you hit phase 2, there'll be a couple of other things. You'll still do your monthly webinars. You'll still, you'll have actually a coach that will be assigned to you, an implementation coach. But I think for right now, it's best just to stay focused on phase 1. So before we transition to our first small group activity, what questions do you have about phase 1? I'm going to hand it over to Matt, since I see no questions, and he will walk you through activity 1. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, everybody. It's really good to be with you today. And, you know, as I think about this is our second learning community. And we've all worked through the first deliverable, which is really that roster of our campus community partnership. So what we're going to do today is really get a chance to process that together. And I think that's really important, because what we're doing here in phase 1 is a process. You know, we want at the end of this process for you all to have a really tight, really strong action plan to support implementation in phase 2. And, you know, one of the things too that we can do as part of this learning community is to work together. So with this activity, we're going to accomplish sort of both those goals as we reflect on, you know, what we learned and challenges we encountered through that first, through the process of creating that first deliverable. Next slide. Today we're going to use Google Drive, and that's really going to facilitate this activity. The link is actually is up on screen, and I'm going to put it in the chat box here to the Google Sheet that we're going to use. Next slide. Really, what we're going to do today is we're going to randomly assign you to Zoom breakout rooms, and they're all going to be numbered. There's going to be 6 different breakout rooms. So when you get into the room, make sure that you remember your number. You'll need it when we sort of debrief and process out the activity. And what you're going to do is your group is going to work through a series of 5 processing questions or reflection questions together. And you're going to take notes on the Google Sheet. And really one of the neat things about Google Sheets is that first, the cells will expand as you type, so they'll get as big as you need. The second is that you'll actually get to see all of the groups working at the same time. Right now, we're all remote, and we are all coming together through technology. And this sort of simulates what we might do if we were together. And it's really a good way also for us to engage and learn more about each other as well. We're going to spend probably a little bit less than 15 minutes at this point on the activity, but we'll still have enough time. Next slide. All right. We're going to network and we're going to reflect on our Deliverable 1 experiences. So the questions really are going to focus, number 1, on early wins. And what were those early wins that resulted from Deliverable 1? And if you're anything like me, sometimes I complete a task, complete a deliverable, complete a report, and I never have the chance to think about it. So I think as you reflect, you'll probably find that there really were some important early wins. We'll get a chance to talk about challenges that we encountered along the way and how we work through those challenges. We'll think about the next steps, essentially the work we did with Deliverable 1, how that's going to set us up for maybe Deliverable 2, and then also for the action plan that we're going to be creating. And Holly mentioned that we're all trailblazers in this initiative. So one of the things that we're also going to ask is for you to think about any advice you might give to a campus community partnership that was doing a similar project in the future. What maybe would you like to suggest? What might be done differently based on what you've experienced so far, or what went really, really well? So right now, I'm going to actually probably ask that everyone click onto the link in the chat box. So this is what the Google Drive looks like. You'll see that everyone's anonymous. We've got anonymous chinchilla, and we've got about 10 people in there right now. Amanda is actually going to be assigning you into those breakout rooms, and then you'll get a chance in those breakout rooms to network and then to work through those questions. So at this point, before we start to assign you into the breakout rooms, I just wanted to ask if there are any questions, anything not working properly related to seeing the Google Drive or accessing it. So Rebecca is mentioning that for some community folks, the Google Drive is not accessible due to HIPAA or protective regulations. Okay, absolutely. You may also run into some firewalls with that as well. It may be in your breakout room that someone who has access to it can screen share it for your breakout group. And that hopefully might be a good workaround during the activity. How about any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing the Google Drive. We're all back in our Hollywood Squares version. And Amanda, you can actually start to get us assigned into breakout rooms.
All right.
All right. I think we've got everybody back. Thank you so much for being part of the activity and really for the hard work. It was really interesting to watch what was coming out from those questions. We saw key wins such as identifying new partners, having new ideas, starting to identify roles and capacities to assist with the partnership. Really important work and important accomplishments for the first step in this planning process. We also heard about challenges. The idea of pandemic fatigue. The idea that we do need additional partners, and identifying how it is that we can engage those partners, and also the idea too of this being a planning process and trusting that process. I know for me, so much of what I do is it's prescribed and I'm managing towards an outcome, and it takes time to get used to the idea of a planning process where we're on a journey, and it's a different rhythm. And then the idea too is with our next steps, really starting to move forward, starting to remove more of those challenges and barriers that have come up. And in terms of friendly advice, I love some of the suggestions. The idea of thinking about that balance between too many partners and too little. And the idea too of not starting the day before. And then really understanding too, as we're working with our teams, that rhythm and the time we need to work together. So I want to talk real quickly about some of our next steps. So at this point, we've gotten all of our first deliverables in, which is great. And your deliverables 1 through 4 are going to contribute to a strategic plan, an action plan that will guide the implementation for you. That's the big goal, and that's really where we're headed. The process of getting there is going to be something that we have a good sense of how that's going to roll out, but in part we're going to learn from you and learn from how each step of the process unfolds. So we'll be adapting along the way and growing and learning right alongside you. The idea too is that we want to move forward. We want to make progress. So much of what you're going to do is going to be responsive to your context. So a lot of it, there's not necessarily going to be a right answer. But what I can say is that if you have questions or challenges come up, we're happy to talk with you, to provide technical assistance, to meet, to really work through anything that's come up or anytime you have questions. But there certainly will be times that we really aren't able to do a value judgment. And deliverable 1 is a great example of that. There's no right or wrong, for your team and for the partnership, but we're here to help and support in any way that you can, or any way that you need. You may find as we go forward that there are times you want to reach out. There may be times we reach out, and that's great, because we're all going to move forward together on this. So I want to say thank you for being part of this activity. Thank you for the hard work so far. Thank you for trusting us, trusting the process. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly, and she's going to lead us into our second small group activity.
Absolutely, thank you. Before we transition over, are there any questions that you have? Seeing no one unmute and nothing in the chat box, we will move on to our next activity, which is going to be a 4 corners activity. And the goal of this activity is to continue to develop relationships with your cohort here, but also reflect thoughtfully on the pre-work that you did. And you have those questions to keep in mind as you watch the video and you read those couple of articles. And so to do this 4 corners activity, I need you to head on over to the Google Drive, and I will share it for those of you who are unable to log in and see that. Being in the Google Drive, you want to be in the Read Me First task sheet. And before we get started with our 4 corners activity, we're going to do a little bit of work together. So in step 1, let's think about the challenges that educators across the age span are facing. And to do this, we're going to reflect on that essay that was part of your pre-work titled, "What is the Purpose of School?" And also the knowledge we acquired by watching the Wicked Problems video. So if your last name begins with A through M, I would like you to answer the first question. How are the challenges that campus community partnerships, CCPs, are facing similar to what their colleagues in preschool through 12 are facing? So if your last names are A through M, just choose a square and type. For those of you whose last names are N to Z, you're going to answer the question, how are the challenges that campus community partnerships are facing different than what their colleagues in P12 are facing? And that's what our N through Z groups are going to look at. And then when you're ready, why are a lot of the challenges that are being faced either in the P12 system or in the higher ed system can be considered wicked problems? And that's where you pull in that knowledge from that video. And if you're done, take the opportunity to scroll through and read what your colleagues are writing. This is amazing reflection on really the state of education from preschool through higher education. And I really appreciate the thoughts and thinking that you have. It's really clear from the responses here that you all took the time to review the pre-work carefully and really thoughtfully engage in it. And we know that you all have multiple things to do and that you're all maxed out and working toward these big issues and understanding that the solution set, right? There could be multiple solutions. There's not one single solution. So we really appreciate it. And it really thank you for that engagement. And so this is really designed to prime the pump into bringing us into that second article. To get to the good, you have to dance with the wicked. We did some TA calls with a few of our campus community partnerships in Deliverable 1. And one issue that they said is, you know, the issue that we face, we picked something too big, right? What are we going to do? We're never going to be able to deal with it with $50,000 in this compressed amount of time. And we said, you know what, you came to the right place, right? Because Deliverable 2 is designed to help support you in thinking through, we've got this big wicked problem. So what is one piece of that we feel this group is poised to take on, and one solution to pose to try out to get an early win for this campus community partnership, so this partnership can get some momentum. Because the idea is that your partnership isn't going to end when the funding ends, right? The partnership is going to continue to tackle those wicked problems that are complex, multi-layered, systemic, historical in nature. So this next piece of today is going to be kind of fun. And so just hang on and hang in there with me. Is we're going to divide you up into 4 groups. And when you're divided into 4 groups, you'll notice that each of your groups has a color on it. So before you go into your Zoom room, notice what color of the group that you are being invited to. This is called a 4 corners activity. If we were to do it in person, I would have chart paper up on each of the 4 corners of the room. You would go there with your group, and you would stand there in front of your chart paper, and I would give each group a different color marker so to write with. And so that marker color is going to be on your group name. And whenever you type into any document, you're going to use that same marker color. So if you're the blue, you'll type in blue font. If you're the purple group, you'll always type in purple font. Now on Zoom, we can't move you from corner to corner to corner to corner, but what we can do is keep you in your same room and tell you, now it's time for you to close out of the question 1 doc and open up the question 2 doc. And then we can send you a message on Zoom that says, now it's time for you to close out of the question 2 doc and open up the question 3 doc. Does that make sense? Give me a sign of nod or an emoji. All we need is one person in each group to know how to do this and walk the groups along. So we'll see that group green is going to start and go question 1, question 4, question 3, question 2. Group 2 will be blue, group blue, and they'll start at 2, and then they'll go to 1, 4, and 3, and so forth. So the idea of this is, if in round 1, you're the starter, you've got to answer the question, kind of brain dump. Then the second round, you read the question, review what everyone says. And if you're like, oh my gosh, this is right on, you can add a comment in your marker color. You can add a smiley face or a plus, or then you can add anything new. right? And the idea is that we can all communicate with one another in this small group way as we go around the room to the corners. Are there any questions before we get started? The questions are in the PowerPoint document. So you'll see them. Are you seeing my Google Drive screen? So you'll see this PowerPoint slide is Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And so you'll just be coming in and out of these documents. So Q1, if we just open up, for example, the question is, what are some of the signs and symptoms your campus community partnership is working on a wicked problem and must narrow the scope? Group green will start there, so I started it in group green. It will give you about 5 minutes in this group, and then we'll tell you when to switch. Everyone good? All right. I'm going to stop my share, and Amanda, do you have the breakout rooms ready to go?
Yep, I do.
Well, it looks like we are all back in our larger group, and everyone make it to all the 4 corners. Some yes and some no. Yeah. Well, we are so glad that you had the opportunity to talk with each other about this notion of wicked problems and how the Rise and Thrive can support you in moving forward. And we saw as we peeked in that many of the issues are just wicked by nature. And you talked about a lot of the symptoms in that when we looked at that slide. We know that we're not ever going to be able to solve some of the wicked problems. We just kind of solve and resolve them over and over again. In the original Wicked Problem article, I like to say it's vintage because it was written in 1973, which was the year I was born, and they mentioned mental health and substance use as being one of the most wicked problems facing society. And so that's almost 50 years for those of you who can do quick math, and we're still dealing with these issues. We hope that the Rise and Thrive initiative can support you all in doing one potential solution to try and get an early win and get traction for your campus community partnership to move forward. So our next step is deliverable 2. We know that we're running behind today. We had a little bit of Zoom technical issues. We know that many of you have children you need to go pick up, so please go ahead and feel free to do so. This is being recorded, so you will be able to see those last pieces. But I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Laura to talk about those deliverables, and no worries if you have to jump off, everything will be recorded.
Hey, thanks. So I promised to make this a minute or less, and I did want to have a chance just because I missed the first meeting and unfortunately didn't get a chance to get introduced to you all at that point. But I think if you can skip ahead to the next slide. Okay, so I'm Laura. I'm with Pyre and part of the team that's been working behind the scenes on Rise and Thrive, and you've seen emails come through from me related to your deliverables. So next slide, just a quick reminder that you do want to take a team approach because it's a lot of work and we encourage partnership and co-creation. So don't do it all yourself. You'll have the team form again with this deliverable to figure out who's doing what and help you divvy out the work. Next slide. Okay, so you'll get, of course, all this tomorrow. So just quickly, similar to deliverable 1, with deliverable 2, you'll have your team form. So who's doing what? You'll have your kind of core deliverable, which this time is a problem of practice form. And then you'll reflect on it, fill out your reflection form. And then there is one optional deliverable. So this is up to you if you choose to do it or not, but it's a peer conference, which is just an opportunity for you to connect with one of the other grantees. We did that just because you all had shared some really helpful feedback with us that you wanted more of a chance to connect. So if you want to do that, all the guidance is there. You've already been matched with another grantee who you can meet with. And then of course you'll submit everything to me and Julie, just like you did last time. So next slide is just a very brief screenshot just to give you a little taste of the problem of practice statement. I'll just say briefly that just like we talked about today, this is just to help you narrow down that big wicked problem to something that's really concrete, that has a specific problem that's feasible for you to solve within the time frame and your resources. So I'll wrap up there. I almost kept it to under a minute. We can skip this. This is just some examples of problems you wanted to solve. And I'll turn it back over to wrap up the meeting.
Thanks, Laura. Again, if you need to leave, it's no problem. This will be recorded. Just a couple of items regarding seeking support. So the first thing, if you do check page 2 of today's agenda, you'll find that link to the new Rise and Thrive Initiative website. If you want to access the Rise and Thrive Initiative on that, if you want to hit the drop-down menu, select schools, scroll on down and select Rise and Thrive. We also, on that particular website, have some great bite-sized leadership videos. And again, all these videos are 10 minutes or less, and they're great professional development videos. Also, just to mention, that Rise and Thrive Google website is continuously being updated. Again, you're not alone in this. You guys had a chance really to work together today, meet some new people. So please reach out to your fellow peers. Also, the drop-in calls will continue on Mondays and Thursdays. The Zoom links are provided there, and we'll continue to put that in a follow-up email. If those times don't work for you, the one-on-one technical assistance session with Matt Corser, and Matt can be reached either by phone or email as suggested there. We know that you guys are being piled with plenty of work. So if our work happens to slip, we do have a form for that. And you can access the Google Drive for that. Next slide. Just a reminder about the webinar series. Thank you for your attendance at this last webinar series. The continuing education will come from the Prevention Action Alliance, but our next webinar is on Wednesday, November 10th. And you can use that link to register. It is also, we will also provide that in follow-up emails. Just a note that future webinars will also be, you can save the date for those, and those will be listed on the website. And archived webinars are those that have already been completed. One note, the Student Mental Health Services, the one that we just had in October, that one has yet to be posted up on the website, but it will be soon, hopefully by the end of this week. Next slide. Again, continuing education credits. So those come from 2 different places. For these learning communities, you'll be receiving information from me. And for these learning communities, we currently are offering OCPS and CHES. If you want to contact me about other CEs, please do so. And you'll be receiving the evaluation and post-meeting CE credit. Any questions specific to your grant, please reach out to me. If you're not sure who to reach out to, typically with regard to payment and terms, that's me, Grant Deliverables, that's Dr. Corser or Dr. Ballas. And remember, there's no wrong door. We're always here to help. Thanks again for your time. You'll receive the evaluation and follow-up information via email. Thanks again. We appreciate it. Have a great evening.